Hey now, it is time for part 2 of my top 100 games list. We are counting down from number 90 to number 81, and of course we could not do without the rebuttals from the Board Game Geek community. So, let's get right to it. My number 90 is a new game. It just premiered at Essen this year, and that is RS Alchemia from Manifest Destiny. This is a very cool worker placement game with a theme that I like a lot about. It's like kind of an anime-tinged world that where you're trying to do alchemic formulas in order to fulfill orders to your customers, and of course gain points for doing so. Whoever has the most points at the end is going to be the winner. But there's some innovative things here that I haven't seen in other worker placement games, and that is that, like in any game, you get a certain number of workers that you have to use sparingly throughout the round, but you can actually bump people out of spaces by putting more and more workers down on the board. So there's not a limited amount of spaces, it's just how many workers are you willing to use to get that spot. It's really cool. There's this explore action which lets you get more resources. You can get helpers that are going to help you in the lab, and there is some dice rolling when you try to explore and also make your formulas, but I think it just adds to the creativity of the game. Really enjoy it, and I hope it gets picked up in the US. That is RS Alchemia. However, Josh says, a blatant ripoff of last year's Gluck auf Coal Baron. He messed up by the working design by introducing random die rolls that are far more important than any small efficiency advantage gained by good play. My number 89 is Kune Goddess from Japanime Games, and I think that Kune Goddess has kind of got lost in the shuffle in the past couple of years with Tanso Kore, its her sister game from Japanime, being a much more popular anime-themed deck builder, and also just the Kickstarter did not really go off very well, and people had a lot of ill feelings about how it was delivered, but I think people missed out on a very cool little deck builder. It's got this cool theme of mixing as like Norse mythology with Greek mythology, and there's this cool chaining system where in order to play more cards you have to chain them together with different colors. I think that some other deck builders like Nightfall use this as well, but I really like the artwork in this game aside from the tiny text. I really like that when you play with multiple players you have to play team games, which is really cool because your ultimate goal is to knock out your opponent's god or goddess, and that also adds more interaction than most deck builders have. But also of note, this game works really well as a two-player game, which not every deck builder can say. So I appreciate this game. I'm sure there'll never be an expansion, but I wish that there was, and I wish that more people appreciated it as much as I do. That's Kune Goddess from Japanime Games. However, and this is probably my favorite comment I've read so far, Epsilon Balls says, awful game. Add boobs to a terrible deck builder with some crappy combo design. If you like boobs and anime girls, you should buy this game. If you value sanity and gameplay, pass. And now for a completely different game. My number 88 is Freedom the Underground Railroad from Academy Games. You hear a lot of people talk about this game and say that it's like a history lesson right there on the table, and that it's really good for teaching kids history. And I agree with those points, but do not let that fool you into thinking that this isn't a gamerly game. It is a heavy, cool, cooperative game. It's like a puzzle. You're trying to get these cubes representing slaves up across the border into Canada, but every time that you're moving them around the map of the United States, you're also moving slave catchers closer to them. So it's a puzzle trying to figure out how you can move them to keep the slave catchers away and to maximize the amount of slaves that you're getting north, because if you're not able to do that, they're going back on the slave market, and it's potentially possible that they'll die if the slave market is full. But you can also recruit the help of famous abolitionists and different types of action cards, all thematic to the period. Does it sound like this game has a cool theme integrated into the mechanics? It does. It's a fantastic example of that, and that's why I enjoy it so much. And also, I love the fact that we can even play a game like this and have a mature conversation about a dark period in our country's past. I hope that, I really applaud Academy Games for this, and I hope that they keep these sort of innovative historical games coming. But Archive77 says, I'll be honest, the theme is depressing, and when the game was over and we all lost, I just felt terrible until the next game began. It would take a lot to convince me to try this one again. My number 87 is Evo from Asmodee. This is a game from Philippe Kiarts, the designer of Small World, and a lot of people think that this is just like a prototype version of Small World, and this Small World replaces it. I disagree. I'm proud to have them both on my shelf because Evo does some really cool things. The theme is really cool. You're just trying to nurture and grow a tribe of dinosaurs in a prehistoric time. The second edition of the game has like the weird story where it's like humans controlling the dinosaurs, but nevertheless, you're trying to, it's an area control game. You're trying to gain control of different areas of the board and fight your opponents for them, but you can also bid for mutations that will make your dinosaurs stronger over time, like being able to withstand the cold or the heat, or to just be better at combat. It's really cool how all of that works and how the climate changes over time before you finally get to the big extinction event and you add up your points. But I really like how the theme is integrated here. I like the second edition better than the original with the really beautiful artwork, even though the theme is a little bit weirder in this one. But I really enjoy it. Like I said, I proudly keep it next to Small World. I think they both have a place in my collection. That is Evo from Asmodee. However, Dark Knight says, how in the world can you take such a great game and screw it up this badly on a second go-round? Just an absolutely horrible remake of a wonderful game to begin with. It's just 11 Ways to Sunday, a complete mess. So glad to be rid of it. Number 86 is Friday from Rio Grande Games, and this may be the only solo-only game on my list. This game involves the story of Robinson Crusoe, but you're not taking control of Robinson, you're taking control of his man Friday, and what you're trying to do is get Robinson to get stronger after he's shipwrecked on the island and get strong enough to take out the evil pirates who are hovering around in the ocean. But it's not quite that simple because at the beginning of the game, Robinson is pretty dumb. He's pretty dumb and he's pretty weak. So you have to make him stronger. And the main mechanic here is deck building. You have a deck full of cards that are pretty bad in the beginning, and you're going to have to go through these different hazards on the island. And you want to succeed at the hazards because you're trying to get better cards into your deck. But if you fail the hazards, you'll lose health, which is bad. It could ultimately lead to you losing the game. But you'll be able to call the bad cards from your deck that you want to get rid of. So I love that idea. I love that back and forth of, do I purposely fail this and not go all out because I want to get rid of these crappy cards that are holding me back? And all the while, Robinson's getting older, which means you might have to take age cards, and the hazards get worse and worse before you lead up to the final showdown with the pirates. Fantastic game, really. Even if it's only solo, it would be higher on my list if I could play this game with more people, but thematically, it really works this way. This is my #1 game to take when I'm getting my oil changed at my local car dealership. That is Friday from Rio Grande Games. But my paradox says, quite simply, after several plays, it felt repetitive and boring. It just wasn't fun. My number 85 is Say Bye to the Villains, reprinted in English from AEG from the original Japanese version and designed by Seiji Kanai of Love Letter fame. And I like the name. I know some people don't, but it's actually a Japanese play on words, Say Bye meaning vengeance or revenge. This is a cooperative game that's essentially like Seven Samurai. In feudal Japan, there are some evil people that have come to town and are being merciless with the townsfolk. And you and the other players represent stronger than usual townsfolk who have had enough. You become vigilantes at night and you go to a final showdown to take out the villains once and for all. However, really what the whole game is building up to that point. The whole game is buffing. You're making yourself as strong as possible, increasing your health, your speed, and your life by playing cards down to your character. Prepping yourself for the final showdown, and when you're ready or when you can't play cards anymore, you put your character card by the villain you're attempting to face. When every player has done that, it's time for the showdown. Now, it's not quite that simple because in addition to each villain having their own stats and special abilities, each villain has an array of cards that represent hidden dangers like thugs and assassins that are in their employ, and different things that you may not account for, like maybe the villain's actually a good guy. So it's a bit random in that regard, but you can try some deduction to try and figure out what their forces are like. And I really enjoy all the clever mechanics in this game. It is brutally tough, but you really should just try your best and do as well as you can and just have some fun with it. That is Say Bye to the Villains from AEG and Seiji Kanai. However, Pilgrim 152 says, seems to fall down in the unless you're lucky you won't win category more than most co-ops, although can't really say that after only a couple of plays. I didn't get much out of playing it though. My My number 84 is a fairly new game, and that is Zombie 15 from Yellow Games. This is a real-time cooperative game. Each player takes control of a teenager during the zombie apocalypse. All the adults have been killed, and you're trying to get out of the city with your lives and maybe even potentially find out the root cause of this zombie outbreak. And as I said, it's a real-time game, and as the name of the game implies, you have 15 minutes to accomplish each different scenario, and you can set different difficulties. There's a soundtrack that you play that has zombie growls that tells you when to add new zombies into the board, and sometimes the zombies will overflow, and the game comes with a cup where you just dump zombies all out on the board, which is pretty thematic. It just represents a huge herd of zombies coming after you. The game is real-time, but you take turns normally, which I think is a cool way to handle it. You're trying to run around the city, getting equipment, taking out zombies, helping each other. Lots of cool equipment, beautiful artwork. Really love the theme, the artwork, the character design, everything about it. And it's been a huge hit in my group. That's Zombie 15 from Yellow Games. But Glucose says, don't like real-time games, not many interesting choices and low replayability. If you like to do basic things in a hurry, this is your game. My number 83 is Dungeon Run from Plaid Hat Games, and I always got the sense that Dungeon Run is the black sheep or redheaded stepchild of the Plaid Hat family, even though I think that spot should be reserved for City of Remnants. But I think it's an underappreciated game. It's got a really cool theme. It takes place in the Summoner Wars universe, and you each take control of characters that are indicative of the races from Summoner Wars: elves, humans, cave goblins, things like that. And you're sort of teaming up in the first part of the game to go into this dungeon and get through all the monsters and the big bad boss that's guarding the summoning stone you're trying to get. And you can kind of sort of help each other. You can backstab each other if you want, trying to get different equipment, but really you're going to have to work together to some degree to take out the big boss at the end, but someone is going to grab that summoning stone to try and win. And at that point, all bets are off. Whoever grabs the summoning stone is a huge target, and they get much more powerful and are able to summon monsters themselves. And it's just a mad dash for the exit with that stone. I really love the arc of the game. I like the card play and the dice rolling. It just all seems to work together well with the sort of negotiation and backstabbing. And if you play the game right, I think it sings really well. And I wish that it got more love. There's a sequel coming out soon, so hopefully they'll fix a couple of the wonky things about it, and people will appreciate it much more. That's Dungeon Run from Plaid Hat Games. But Johnny Spy says, white bread? Oh, okay, sure. My number 82 is Florenza from Pegasus Spiel, one of the few straight-up Euro games on my list, but boy howdy is it a good one. And also I just like saying boy howdy. This is a game all about building towers in Renaissance Florence, and you're doing that by actually building them using tiles that you take off the board from cards, and it uses the small world mechanic of taking a card further down the line and having to put tiles on all of the other cards, which means that tiles will stack up on the cards that no one else has been taking, and eventually that gets to be too good to resist. You may even take a really bad card if it means you can get the tiles that you need, the different colored ones, to build the towers that you're aiming for. But there's this pressure of, if you're not constantly building up your towers, you may lose all of your progress, and it's a race to get to the best, juiciest point spots on the towers before the other players do. Really well done game. Beautiful game to behold, especially when you start building. Everyone's got all the little tiles out and they're building, and it's just a light to mid-weight Euro game that I think is going to be good for a lot of different people. That is Florenza from Pegasus Spiel. However, W Cover says, I kept praying that sentries would arrive to lock me away in one of the towers I was building. Why? Aging ungracefully in damp, cold isolation would be 10 times better than playing this again. And finally, for this part of the top 100, easily the lightest game in these 10 games that I've just talked about, that is my number 81, Parade from Z-Man Games. This is just a very light but very fun game that is all about trying to not take points, which is one of my favorite parts of simpler card games, any game that requires you to not take points. You have a line of cards representing the parade, and this is very, very lightly themed with an Alice in Wonderland theme. And you're just trying to, you have to play cards on your turn, and you're playing them in such a way that you're trying to take as few cards as possible, but depending on the number of cards that you take, you skip a certain amount of cards in the parade, but then everything after that number of cards, let's say you play a 9, you'll skip the first 9 cards, but everything after that you may have to take. And the parade gets longer and longer, and sometimes if people take a lot of cards, the parade will get shorter, so it'll bounce back and forth, but you're trying to take as few cards as possible, but if you take the most of any one color of card, then they'll all only count as 1 point instead of their face value. But if you're just trying to aim to take sets, you may be overcome at the end by someone who has done their best at not taking any cards whatsoever. And I really like that aspect of it. It can really sneak up on you. Parade, really cool, really neat, very easy to understand card game that I can play with anyone. It's a great gateway card game, but even experienced gamers in my group have seemed to like it. And Deslore says, like new, played once. Hey, thanks so much for watching this part of my top 100. I'm getting more and more excited as we get higher and higher up the list. Please tune into part 3 where we're going to take a look at numbers 80 to 71. Can't wait. Thanks so much. Have a good one.